Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deadhead Cannabis Show. My name is Larry Mishkin of the Hoban Law Group, and we got a great show for you today. We're very excited. Among other things, we're for the first time experimenting with simulcasting through the Clubhouse app, and hopefully that goes well for us too. Joining me today is my co-host, Rob Hunt of Lene Holdings. Rob, how you doing?
I'm great today, Larry. How you doing?
Well, we're doing a lot better here in Chicago. It's 50 degrees, which means it's finally starting to warm up. But of course, now my backyard has turned into a giant lake because when 2 feet of snow melts all of a sudden, it doesn't have anywhere to go. But that's a problem for another day. Otherwise, it's sunny and beautiful, and very, very happy about that, and ready for another show. Tell us what we have on tap today, Rob.
Well, we should have a good show. We're going to cover a couple things. One's going to be the influence that Vince Welnick had on the Grateful Dead in the later years from 1990 until 1995. And then the other thing I think we're going to touch on is we're looking at a pretty big anniversary of the Fillmore West from 1969, where they played a pretty fun 4-night run that I know, Larry, you know really well. So between those two things on the Grateful Dead side, we've got a lot to cover. And then on top of that, I think we're going to talk about a couple big newses that have happened in the cannabis industry, including the legalization in New Jersey, as well as other states that are looking at changing their programs here pretty soon, including both South Carolina and North Dakota have both been in the news in the last couple of days about how they're thinking about moving their programs forward. So we've got a lot of news in the cannabis industry, and we've got a lot of fun stuff to discover on the Grateful Dead side. And we were really lucky to be joined by another Westchester guy today. We seem to be having a lot of Westchester guests on in Greg Koerner, who has been involved in many iterations of different bands that have a nexus to the Grateful Dead, as well as being directly related to Vince Welnick musically. So, Greg, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on and spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
So, before we get into the cannabis side, maybe we'll just jump right into the Grateful Dead side. And why don't you give us a sense? You and I have a lot of friends in common. We've never met. We were introduced through mutual friends. Give us a sense of kind of how you found your way into the Grateful Dead community and how you ended up playing music around Westchester, and now I guess even still today through Pete Shapiro's venues and all the rest of that fun stuff.
Sure, yeah. Well, I grew up in Westchester, and you were mentioning that bar, the Fore and Aft in White Plains, and that's where I first started playing music. I was like 13 or 14 years old. I started playing gigs there, and they had every Tuesday night they had a Grateful Dead night. So my band Crimson Rose played there for many years. Played in dead bands, all through my teenage years in college and long after that. But then I kind of given it up. But then I got a call around like 2000, 2001. The Dark Star Orchestra was looking for a bass player. So I did that gig for a little while, and then through that I met Vince Welnick, and then started playing with him after Dark Star Orchestra, and then played with him, right up until he died. That's where I guess was probably. When did Vince pass away? Actually, I'm thinking 6-7 years.
2006, I think.
Yeah, so it was only about 6 years. But so that's how I fit into the whole Grateful Dead thing, and how I met Vince, and we just started playing together, kind of one-off gigs, and just loved his company and loved playing with him, and so the height, I think we were doing almost like 100 shows a year.
That's amazing. Greg, we've all got some great questions for you, but just really quickly, I want our listeners to note that my other co-host, Jim Marty of Bridge West, has joined us. Jim, how are you doing today?
Very good. Just had a little computer trouble.
Well, we all do from time to time. We're glad you made it on the show. We've begun our conversation with Greg Koerner, and he's describing for us his musical background that ultimately led him to it sounds like a relatively close relationship with Vince Welnick in terms of playing. So you actually were touring with Vince's band after he left, after the Dead disbanded?
Yeah, I mean, with Vince, he kind of had some rough times after, he left the Dead. And, he had a great band called the Missing Man Formation after the Grateful Dead. But, Barry Francis was in the band. Steve Kimhock was in that band. So really, probably, I think they made that one record, was probably the best record by any member of the Dead after Jerry died. But, it was very difficult for him to keep that band of that caliber together, and he wasn't able to. And so by the time I met him, he was kind of playing gigs with a lot of different bands all over the place. We became kind of his band on the East Coast, but then we traveled a bit, we went to Colorado. But mostly we were just doing gigs up and down the East Coast with him. Huge pothead and a grower too.
Oh, Vince was, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
it had so many great memories of being with him.
So so like when you guys would be on tour and you'd be sitting around late at night, would he like just, open up and tell you all these great stories about Jerry Garcia and Phil Lesh and those guys?
Oh yeah, he just loved Jerry, but shit on all the other guys in the Dead, and just told great story. And not even the Dead, he was in the Tubes, for
Right.
the majority of his career, how many decades.
Right.
So just great. He had a real amazing life. It was unfortunately it was cut short a little bit. Hit one of the first hippies, moved out to Haight-Ashbury. I think in like 1968. He had a band called the Beans. I think they went from Arizona. They went there, and then at some point that grew into the Tubes. So he was a founding member of the Tubes for around 20 to 30 years.
Right.
But then he would tell stories about his experience with the Grateful Dead, which obviously were very compelling to me. Very straight from the horse's mouth, as it were.
Yep, I'm a little older than these guys, and I got to see the Tubes mostly on television. They did some late night television back in the mid '70s. "What Do You Want from Life" is a great song.
Great song.
One of our good friends is, to this day, he's blonde and gray now, but his nickname is White Punk.
Yeah, we would cover White Punks on Dope. Yeah, that's all. I think he most of his career was with the Tubes. I mean, that was his band. And then, I think he toured and recorded with Todd Rundgren for a number of years. And then he was kind of, I think on hard times when he lucked into the gig with Great.
So what does he say? One day he's just hanging out and he gets a phone call from Garcia that says, "You want to be my keyboard player?"
No, what happened is his wife, she also worked for the Tubes. I think she was a costume designer for the Tubes. And she knew one of the secretaries for that production. And she got him an audition. I think it was T. Lavitz from the Dregs, one of the finalists. But they had a bunch of guys who they auditioned, and I think Vince was like living in his garage. He had a nice place out in California. He was definitely on hard times financially, and when he got that gig, it was obviously a huge life changer, but it was just an incredible reversal of fortune for him. So he auditioned, and then I guess the story is he got a call. A few weeks, and he didn't. He was not a Deadhead, even though he was a hippie. He was not a Deadhead, and he didn't really know their music that well. I don't think. When he got the opportunity to audition, but then once he got the audition, he met Jerry and Weir, and he realized what he was getting into. He was like, "Oh my God, this is the gig of what I've always dreamed of." And he actually would talk about that when he was a kid. He would dream and visualize, this gig.
That's wild.
Yeah. So he got a call from Cameron Spears, I guess the manager. Is your life insurance all paid up? You got the gig. And then I think right after that, he got a call from Garcia. He's like, "Hey, man, come on by and get some money." And that was him. He was making, and he was cut in like an even partner of the Grateful Dead. He wasn't like a hired hand. He was just making the same amount of money from the touring as I think Jerry. So it was a huge.
That's amazing.
Yes, I told that story. Big Steve tells that he got his gig check, and he looked at it and he said, "Is this for the whole tour?" And he goes, "No, man, that was just one show."
Yeah. No, that's pretty amazing stuff, And sure, I'm sure for many musicians, that's almost the kind of stuff of dreams, right? You're in the right place at the right time. You get the call, and the next thing you know, you're out there, jamming with one of the greatest jam bands in history. But I have to say, as a guy who, started in the early '80s, so Brent was my keyboard player. That's the only formation of the Dead I ever really knew, and we'd dream about and say, "Boy, if only we could have seen Keith or Pigpen or whatever." And then we made the switch to Vince, and at first it's like, well, who is this guy? And they had, for better or for worse, they had Hornsby playing too, so Hornsby was taking a lot of the attention away from him. But all of a sudden, man, there was Vince on stage, and I got to tell you, he was great. And we were all talking about it the other day. I really fell in love with him in 1992. And I know, Jim, you and I have talked about the Sam Boyd Silver Bowl shows, but they played 3 shows out there. And at that point, I think Hornsby was gone. It was just him. And especially that third night, probably one of, my top 5, certainly top 10 shows of all time. They did an Addicts of My Life that night, a great Morning Dew, a really solid first set, great Scarlet Fire. They hit all the great tunes. And then at the end, it was my first time seeing the Vince Welnick inspired double encore of Baba O'Reilly into Tomorrow Never Knows, which, made me fall in love with Revolver all over again. So I was just like the happiest guy in the world. And from that point on, I was like, this is great. He fit right in. He was part of the team.
Yep. So I was at those shows. They were wonderful. I remember there was a big, tall post with a thermometer on top of it behind Jerry. Like at midnight, it said 100 degrees.
Yeah, it was warm, definitely warm out in the desert in Las Vegas, no doubt about it. But yeah, from that moment on, and then what I found is people would come to me and say, "You saw Brent play in concert? Wow, that's so cool!" And I was like, I love Brent. He was my guy, but this is my guy now. It's next man up, and Vince stepped up, and I give him total credit for stepping into a tough situation, and as far as I could tell, blended in pretty seamlessly. Rob, what are your thoughts?
It's really funny. I had a conversation about an hour and a half ago with an old friend who's now the touring manager for Anders Osborne and was the stage manager for the String Cheese incident. And we were talking about the earliest days of Vince, and he and I were both at the first Richfield, Ohio show when Vince first came out and played his first shows. And that show actually was without Hornsby. Hornsby didn't come onto the tour until Philly a few nights later. Mm-hmm. So the first 2 nights were just Vince solo. And he and I were laughing about it, that when Vince first walked out with just, whatever keyboard he was playing, that compared to the Hammond B3 and the other rig that Brent had, we looked at it, we were looking at our friends going, what is this? Is this a joke? Is this all the guys going to be playing? Is this little tiny, kid's keyboard? What does he expect to do with that thing? The first night or two, he was still feeling his way, and obviously the rest of that tour helped a lot with Hornsby jumping in, who had spent some time playing with the other members of the band. But there's that period of all right, is this guy going to cut it? Is he going to be able to make it with just playing, what looked like, kid's Casio keyboard? So we were a little concerned. But for me, when it really took off is that, I brought this up recently when we were talking about Eyes of the World from Nassau. And I said, how the sounds that Branford put into the Estimated Prophet were things then that Vince was able to do very similar with his keyboard to mimic the sounds that Branford had done in 1990 when Brent was still playing, and start putting in really cool, funky noises. And this is when the whole band was experimenting a lot more with MIDI. So there's all sorts of wind chime noises and brass noises that were coming out of Phil's bass and coming out of Jerry's guitar. And that then Vince really started getting into what could he do with his keyboard and what sounds could he sample in there. And started getting really cool. So, to your point, I might not have been the biggest Samba in the Rain fan, but I certainly, hit a point where, the influence of Vince is very real, especially in the song choices and the song selection, and especially with the Beatles influence that he brought to the band. So, Greg, I don't know if you could speak, really quickly of someone that spent as much time with Vince as you did. Was he a huge Beatles fan?
Yeah. He was huge, huge Beatles fan. But also one thing I will say, because you said the Casio thing, which used to drive him crazy, and it should be, he said a lot, I've read it elsewhere, but he would say it frequently, that when he joined the Dead, it was not his choice not to have the Hammond sounds and a lot of other sounds that he wanted. They wanted to do the MIDI stuff. They had Bob Brela, program it. So, yeah, that wasn't necessarily his. He was a great organ player, but they definitely did not want him to play any
That's
organ.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I always thought that was interesting, too. And I think he kind of bought, because let's face it, there's a lot of Deadheads he never gets respect from because he wasn't Brent or whatever, and Brent never got so much because he wasn't Pigpen, whatever. But he would always bristle about that because it was not his choice what sounds he was allowed to use. Actually,
let me ask you this, Greg, and far be it from us to ever go anywhere where people don't want us to go, but as Deadheads who were really into it, and like I say, really took Vince under our wing. I never quite heard the whole story, but realized that something wasn't quite right when they came back for that family reunion show in 2002 at Alpine Valley, and they brought out, just about everybody, I think, except maybe Bill didn't show for that, or no, Bill was there. One of them wasn't there, maybe, but they didn't invite Vince along.
Yeah, no, that was a big deal, and it was really sad for Vince. He wasn't invited.
Jeff Clementi's a great keyboard player and all of that, but
I think that was before Jeff even. I think that
was it. What were his thoughts on that? Was that did he feel?
He was bummed out. I mean, it's no secret. It's been written about. He had some issues, and after Jerry died, he was feeling serious depression, and he tried to off himself on the Rat Dog. He was hired by Rat Dog, and after that, he was. My understanding, he was pretty much persona non grata with the whole Grateful Dead scene and the members of the Grateful Dead. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but it was really that way, and it was very sad.
Very sad.
I don't know if how Vince died. Man, he committed suicide.
Yeah.
And it stemmed from that. Well, I mean, obviously, he had mental illness. He was deeply hurt. He was not invited to that, and then for the last 10 years of his life, he was just kind of shut out.
Right. That's really. I mean, look. I can't get involved right in all those decisions and why people do what they do. But as a fan,
Exactly.
I can say that we missed Vince. You know, we were really hoping he'd be part of that to capture as much of that sound as we last remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, whoever they had playing keyboards for them, you know, did a fine job. But I like Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just Alpine; it was like a sustained thing. And I mean, he was. Let's say when I was
Right.
playing all these gigs with him, we were playing bars. If he could have been playing theaters and arenas again, obviously he would have wanted to be doing that.
Did he have a following of Deadheads who would come to your shows?
We did, but it's definitely small potatoes compared to what
Right.
he had experienced.
Right.
And he was. I'm trying to. He had a great time. I was best days of my life, and he was having a great time too. He wasn't. I mean, he wasn't some tragic figure, but he was definitely. It bothered him, and I thought it was kind of unnecessary. That they didn't. They could have thrown him a bone really easily, not necessarily had him on tour or even appear at Alpine. Just over the years, while I was working with him, it's just like, wow, doing all these gigs at these obscure places, and these, it'd be nice if somebody from the Dead would throw old Vinny a bone.
How old was he when he passed?
55.
I'm gonna say he's my age right now, 55. But he was old, 55. He had a lot. That's the other thing. I mean, he had serious health issues. He was emphysema. He did that. He was depressed. But dish and dirt. It's not dish and dirt. He was a great man. He had a great life. But he died the way he did. He just gone off his meds. He had been on his meds, I think, for ever since the incident on the Rat Dog bus until maybe a couple of months before he passed away. I remember we were playing down in Florida, and he told me he was off. We talked for many years about him being on his meds, and he wanted to get off them. And he finally did. And I was like, congratulations. And then a couple of weeks later,
It's a tragedy.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. But like I said, for many years I had a hard time dealing with it. But it wasn't one thing. He was depressed, but he also was dealing with some serious physical issues, which were making life very difficult for him.
Sure.
And
Sure.
yeah, and I know one of his great pleasures was smoking pot. I know what that is for the show.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
No, that's.
But just one other thing, just the way the Dead are kind of. It's just like when they're. It's there. They kind of when they're done with you, they're kind of done with you. It's not. I mean, it's not just the bands. The other guys I know who play with the Grateful Dead, they could use some help.
I hear you. Well, Jim, this kind of makes you the old man of the group. Not that you weren't already, of course, but you've seen who? You saw Keith, you saw Brent, you saw Vince. You've got us on that. So you're uniquely positioned to bring your perspective to the table on that.
Well, I was lucky enough to see not only the Bruce Hornsby Vince duet with the Grateful Dead. For a number of years in the early 90s, they would come to Denver in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, early December, and do some shows. So, yeah, I got to see a lot of Vince shows, Vegas and Denver, and he was always a great addition to the band. Loved it. I believe it was July of 1990 was when Brent Midland passed away.
Right.
And so that's when. So it'd been 1990 when Vince came into the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, I think he really did invigorate the Dead as far as the repertoire and his vocal harmonies, and just he got. I know Jerry loved it.
We also got a new lease on life. I mean, I remember after Brent passed, there was a lot of questions of would the band go on. Without Brent, I'd only seen 12 Brent shows. I ended up seeing 138 shows or 135 shows with Vinny. So I'm a true Vinny guy, right?
Nice.
And I remember being an 18-year-old kid getting the news that Brent had passed and thinking like, oh my God, this is over before it even really got started for me. I can't believe I missed it. So, in many ways, like, thank goodness for Vince Welnick, to come in there and step it up and get the band excited, because when they came back out and announced the fall tour was still on, like, for me, that was like, there's no way they're going to get a person in there and train so fast to learn the entire repertoire in 4 months. And, Vince came out strong. So, thank goodness for Vince Welnick coming in when he did. Yeah, shifting gears a little bit, Greg. I mean, you've, a couple things I didn't know about you, which is, your DSO affiliation as well. Talk to me about playing with John Katalisic as well. I mean, that has to have been really exciting.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, he's just jaw dropping. Just a whole pleasure to play with. Amazing.
He's the only person where I've closed my eyes, and at certain shows I've been like, wow, like I could be at a 1978 Dead show in some mid-sized theater. He's that good sometimes as far as his tone.
And I have to say that at the risk of insulting our listeners who are big Fish fans, if we're going to talk about people being excluded, I was really disappointed that John wasn't brought in for the 50th anniversary shows, because I thought his work with Further, I agree, Rob, I saw them a few times, and when he was up there playing, he filled those Jerry holes as well as anybody did. He sang all the great tunes. He really know how to do it. I mean, that he'd spent his whole life playing Jerry, and he really had it down to a science. And I get that Trey's a big name, and Trey's a great guitar player. I don't deny that. And he knows how to play to a large stadium. But boy, I'm a big John Kadalassic fan, and I was sorry he didn't get the chance to keep playing with him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Dark Star Orchestra. Seen them many times. Yeah, I heard Rob Eaton took a fall and broke his wrist. He can't play his guitar right now.
Yeah, I read about that as well. Yeah, I think he's going to be okay though.
Yeah, it's got some screws in it.
Yeah.
So let's ask about that, though, playing with Dark Star Orchestra, because now you're not just playing Dead. You got to be prepared on any given night to play a 1960s show, a 1990s show, a 1970s show. Just remembering the songs, how do you, they love each other. Oops, it's 73.
Yeah, when I got that gig, like I said, I'd not been playing. The one time in my whole life, I kind of put down my bass. I wasn't playing that much. And then through my friend Cotter Michaels, who still does sound, I think, for Dark Star. I guess not anymore because of the pandemic, but he, he's done a lot of really cool gigs as a sound engineer, and he needed a bass player, and I remember Scott, who was the keyboard player and the leader of the band, I got in touch with him, and he's like, send us a demo, and I didn't have it. I'd like send him a cassette, and then they called me up, and I was playing that for Rockford, Illinois. I didn't know I hadn't met any of the guys. I met all the guys in the band literally. I'm going to say a half hour before we went on. Half hour for sound check.
Wow. That sounds very Dead-esque.
It's just crazy the way Grateful Dead music, and from that time, after that, I met, Vince and played with him, and played with tons of other Grateful Dead bands since then, and before then too. And now I'm playing with Unlimited Devotion, which is a band down here in Florida. I just moved down here, and they've got gigs all over the place. It's just amazing how, like, the Grateful Dead music, and it's such a huge influence on the culture, and the whole tribute band, cover band is just insane how every single city has one.
Was Tim Walter managing DSO when you were with him?
I think he was at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, Tim's a great guy who put on the All Good Music Festival for years in West Virginia.
Right, he's an all good guy. Yeah.
Lots of work at the State Theater and
guy in the Maryland kind of concert industry for many years.
Yeah. I mean, he did everything at in DC and Baltimore, and he had two different markets. He was running, the Jamband scene for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know what he's up to now.
So, Greg, having talked to musicians about doing entire shows, the real challenge is there's always one or two obscure songs that you've got to learn just for that gig.
So true. Yeah, because like most of the songs, like it's part of my DNA. I just know it. Not even thinking about it, you can play them. I mean, sometimes when I have to sing, that I have to kind of turn my brain back on. But this band that I'm playing with now, Unlimited Devotion, it seems like every show there's at least one or two obscure songs that I have to go back and.
What are some of the more obscure ones that you weren't expecting or that you've had to go back?
Like, for example, New Potato Caboose. There's like, we're going to play that one. Like, really? That's one I've never played before. Or trying to think of some really obscure ones that they've thrown at me. Yeah, like the 11, William Tell.
Well, I was just going to ask you about the 11, and that makes a good bridge to where we want to go. But
yeah, that one I had never played before.
The 11 is a tough tune. J-Rad plays it better than anybody I've ever heard, almost better than the Dead. But it's a tough tune. I mean, I know the time signature is tough, and that the lyrics are tough, and but it's one of my favorite Dead songs.
The vocals are really tough, yeah. But yeah, it's when you think about it, like when our whole 30-year career of the Grateful Dead, how many songs that are out? There's probably 1,000 songs, right?
And then if you want to cover their covers, now you're adding another 1,000.
There you go. Or the Jerry Band.
Right. Jerry Band One Night, all of that stuff. There's just so much of it. That's just crazy.
It's like that Blues Brothers thing. Like I play both kinds of music, country and western.
Right.
Both kinds of music, Grateful Dead and Jerry.
What if we ain't got no union cards?
Right. That's right. Rawhide never sounded better.
So, Greg, I got to think that, having also gotten to play with guys like Jorma, who is it that you've actually played with that, you're most in awe of kind of?
Yeah, I definitely played with a lot of my heroes. I got to say, it's really gratifying. Wish I'd played. There's a lot of them still on my list, but I mean, one people I played with a lot were, Charles Neville. I played after Vince died. I started playing with him. I played with him a bit, but no, I did a lot of gigs with Charles, for a few years. Henry Butler from New Orleans, but yeah, I don't want to drop names, but yeah, but
drop names, please. Drop them.
Does anyone stand out as wow, what an amazing experience and what an incredible musician?
Yeah, Vince is definitely a highlight, man. Vince is a highlight of my musical life for sure. He was just incredible knowledge, just really gift as far as voicing and piano playing and singing, and also he's a great writer too. He did a lot of his originals. So anyway, Vince he's up there. I named Charles and Henry. Those are kind of.
But you talk about Vince, and look, I'm not a musician, but I have to believe that if you're going to go into the Beatles songbook, Tomorrow Never Knows has to be one of the more trickier tunes, to pull out and arrange to play, isn't it? As opposed to like Love Me Do. And
I would say I would have to disagree with that. Actually, I would have to disagree. Quarterly, it's one song, it's one chord.
Okay.
Really.
Then there you go.
It's a weird song. It's definitely hard to do it well and get the whole vibe. But I wouldn't say it's the hardest Beatles song.
Well, good. I stand corrected.
He did a bunch of weird, like It's All Too Much, and then we covered that with the Dead.
And Rain and Lucy in the Sky.
Lucy in the Sky, right now. That was him bringing that back, yeah.
And some of these songs that they'd been rumored forever that they were going to play, and then they finally started playing them, right? Day Tripper I heard in the early 80s, I guess.
Day Tripper was 85, though. That was pre-Vince. I thought they'd bring it back with Vince.
I know he brought it back, Here Comes Sunshine. That was his responsibility.
I was there for that breakout in Tempe, Arizona. What a great night to open the first set.
Attention Cannabis Podcast listeners. You can now listen to your favorite cannabis podcast ad-free with the MJ Bulls mobile app. Just download the free MJ Bulls mobile app to your smartphone to start enjoying cannabis podcasts with no commercials. Go to Apple Apps or Google Play to get the MJ Bulls Cannabis Podcast app today.
So I know, Larry, you touched on the 11. I know we want to talk a little bit about the fact that we're coming up on, I think, the 52nd anniversary of the Fillmore West run for a couple of nights. I know those are some of your favorite shows.
Before we get to the Fillmore, also, I think it was Vince's birthday a couple of days ago.
It was, so happy birthday to Vinny. Yeah,
right.
That's Greg. That's actually why we chose Vince as our subject matter for today. I think it's February 21st. Was that right? Is his birthday or 23rd?
Right around, I can't remember the exact date.
Well, happy belated to Vince Welnick, and if everyone out there, tip one back, and one for your homies.
Well, yes, happy birthday to Vinny.
Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right, Rob. 52 years ago, 27th and 28th of February, March 1st and 2nd, 4 nights in a row. We talked about the Capitol Theater shows last week as really kind of being the breakout moment for like the new Grateful Dead, in the sense that they had all of a sudden all of this material of what people would almost think of more as like real traditional types of songs with lyrics and choruses and all of that kind of stuff. But before that, the Grateful Dead became the Grateful Dead, in my opinion at least, on the back of all the psychedelics that they did and the music that they brought to it, which was so new and mind bending at the time. And we talked about the Avalon Ballroom shows, and we talked about some of the small theaters that they've played, and that was primarily the point in time when they were playing those. But for me, if you're going to have to say what was the peak moment of all of that, it was the 4 nights at the Fillmore in '69. And for 4 nights they came out. There wasn't a whole lot of diversity, by God. They knew what they wanted to play, and they played that Dark Star, St. Stephen, 11, Love Light Suite all 4 nights in a row. But they mixed in a whole bunch of other stuff too, some really good Cosmic Charlies, doing that rag every night, and I loved how the sets were almost the same every other night. So, the second set was always Dupree's Diamond Blues into Mountains of the Moon into the Suite.
That's right. That was the Tom Constanten years, huh?
Tom Constanten years. And then the first night, the encore was Cosmic Charlie, but the third night, and I heard David Gans say that the third night is his Desert Island show, right? If you're going to get locked on a desert island with only one show, that you could listen to, and he picks that one because he says, the suite is as great as any, but he loves that one. They do a Hey Jude encore, the full Hey Jude with Pigpen singing it. He botches it up terribly. His voice is absolutely horrible, but it's wonderful to listen to. It's like almost magical that after putting on this amazing psychedelics, and don't forget in '69, I mean, Hey Jude is practically right out of the box at that point. I mean, this is a brand new tune, and they go after it, and they have some fun with it, but it brings the whole night down to a wonderful conclusion. And then the other two nights, they closed out pretty standard with their Alligator, Caution, Feedback, We Bid You Good Night. But that had great jamming in it and great Pigpen raps and great everything. But really, this is really, I think, the pinnacle of them at their absolute best. And of course, this provided almost all of the source material for Live Dead, except for what was it? We said the 11 and the Love Light that they pulled out of the Avalon Ballroom one night. But the Dead thought so much of it that they released their box set, and I have the full one, the complete shows. And I told my wife, if the house is ever burning down, the first thing we have to do is run and grab this box before we go outside. Insurance company can pay me all they want, but you can't get any more of them. This is it, limited number, and they're done. But for me, it really is what made me ultimately fall in love with the Dead, and how much I appreciate everything else they do, because I see this psychedelic thread run through everything. And it's great to go back and just take a look at it sometime and think about how amazing it was to be at these shows in 1969 when this was brand new, and Dark Star hadn't been played 2,000 times. They were still figuring out how to play it and how to hook it up with St. Stephen and, the William Tell bridge that they, threw in there for a little while and everything. And it was them being creative and doing it in a great way. Greg, as a musician, what are your thoughts on those shows in that period of time?
I mean, that Primal Dead era was very brilliant. They were genius. Some of the music they made during that time was arguably their peak. They had a lot of different peaks, but those are amazing. The same era as the Capitol Theater shows, basically.
A couple of years earlier, I think. Yeah.
Was it a couple of years earlier than that? Yeah. But the St. Stephen era, those recordings are. Those were all from. I thought they were from. I didn't know that they were from. Fillmore. I thought that they were Avalon Ballroom, but I know. But that era it was the template for the whole psychedelic kind of experience for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
What was your favorite era to cover when you played with DSO? If they came and said we got a set we want to play,
I would say the Brent era. I'd say the Brent era.
See, so that's great. You grew up at Deadhead. The next thing you know, you're playing with DSO, and then you're playing with Vince. I mean, it really doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it now. It's a blend. Thank God for the Grateful Dead and the music that they made and what they created.
Well, and here's the way I look at it. We're sitting here today, and we're talking about the 50th anniversary of these shows at the Fillmore.
Amazing. It's amazing how old it is now. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah.
Right. I was born if you go back 50 years from when I was born, I mean, that's like the beginning of, the 1900s, and that's ancient. This feels as fresh as it did. I mean, it's just amazing to think that it's 50 years old and it's still, you could play this anywhere, and people who are fans of music are going to love it.
It's so old that Jim wasn't even seeing shows yet.
But Larry, you were at those shows, you're saying?
Oh, no. I was not. No, I was 8 years old at the time of those shows. Believe me, I wish I was at those shows. But they are shows that, it took me a while, right? You had to get into the Dead, and I was, in the early 1980s, and that was my Dead music. And little by little, I went back and I started experimenting with the earlier stuff, and finally found my way into the late 1960s and just discovered that, I mean, to be able to put on a Dark Star for 25 minutes and, just sit there and listen to them and do it differently every time, but, just as mesmerizing each time was a whole new way to listen to music. I love it.
Yeah. It's just amazing the way the way people, at least for myself, the way I got into the Grateful. Well, first I didn't like them, and then when I was 12 or 13, and then,
Right.
Skeletons from the Closet, borrowed that record. And then it's interesting, I guess. And that was one of the first concerts I went to in 1979, Nassau Coliseum. And then immediately I was like, yeah, I get it now. So, and then after that, to just, discover all the different, eras of the music, of next several years.
So you just missed Keith, and you got the first, like, very early Brent.
Very year must have been one of the first tours.
Because Jim Marty's with us. His first show was the Springfield Coliseum, the 115/79, where he still actually caught Keith on there, and then his next show was a Brent show a few months later. So
right in April, wasn't it, Jim? Like right one of his very first shows. I would highly recommend to anybody, if you really want to explore the Grateful Dead and really get to their guts, and I love that term Primal Dead. I think that's a great way to describe it. Get your hands on some of this music. It's on YouTube, it's anywhere, but get your hands on it and just listen to it for a little while. And and then if you read Ken Kesey, and Tom Wolfe talking about the electric Kool-Aid acid test, this is exactly when this is happening. And all of that stuff is going on. And that reminds me, I just want to jump in here really quick. We had talked about quotes, and I was looking through all of this stuff, and it got me into the original box set, So Many Roads, if you remember that one. And in the booklet, I was reading through, and there's this great Ken Kesey quote to Peter Shapiro, and Kesey says, "When you see a magic trick, there's a crack in your mind. You know it's a trick, but you can't figure it out. That crack lets in all the light. It opens up all the possibilities. When that little split thing happens, when the Dead are playing and everybody in the audience goes, 'Wow, did you see that?' That is the moment. And kids will watch 5 hours of mediocre music to have that one click happen because that puts them in touch with the invisible." And I'm like, that's it in a nutshell, right? We'll go around and we'll track down 25 shows. Some of them are, but you have to be there that one night when they break out Here Comes Sunshine, or they play a song a different way for the first time, and it just blows your mind. And that's why we keep coming back.
So, hey, Greg, we're going to talk about cannabis for a few seconds here, and we'd love to have you join us on that as well, because I'm guessing you might know a thing or two about the cannabis space as well.
Big hothead. I'm a lawyer, too, so I have a bit of a...
Yeah.
Oh, welcome to the club.
As are me and Larry, so unfortunately we're all attorneys that still like our cannabis.
Or luckily.
So, but would you be willing to stick around for a couple minutes after and take a couple questions from Clubhouse so we can figure out how to make this work?
Sure.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thanks, man.
Wonderful.
So, Larry, what's happening in the world of cannabis this week?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I know that for our friends out on the East Coast, they're all excited because New Jersey's finally pulled the trigger, and they're going to have an adult use program out there. As a Midwest guy, I'm just happy for anybody. But I know that for folks who live in New Jersey, it's a big thing, not just because they're going to get legal weed, but because New York doesn't have it yet.
So for once, Jersey's ahead of New York is what you're saying?
That's what it seems like to me. We'll see how long it takes Cuomo to rebound on that one, but good for New Jersey. That's hats off to them. And I think that, and we've talked about this, the East Coast hasn't really come of age in the cannabis world yet. And it really needs to, as much as we think of everything being centered in California and Colorado and up and down the West Coast and the Green Triangle, but who are we kidding? New York is the center of the universe in this world. And, but it's not just the center of the universe. It's been the home, Greenwich Village and all sorts of areas in New York have been the home to, some of the coolest of the cool people and, left wing and all of this, alternative lifestyle. And I say, we've got to get New York and New Jersey and all of these states on the legal side of things and with adult use programs. And, once that happens, I think that, not that I don't think we're well past the tipping point anyway, but yeah, I'm all for it. The East Coast will carry the day for us.
Yeah, shoot. For example, I just came down to Florida and got my, registered. So now I got my card, and I'm just used to I was paranoid every day of my life from the time I was 16 years old driving, and I still am. It's because let's face it, you got to be careful. But I mean, if you get called a little bit of pot now, I can't imagine I'm going to get arrested. With my pat, even if I'm not in Florida, I'd be surprised. So. It's a huge relief. Thank God. I never thought I'd live to see the day. Obviously, you're familiar with the irony that a lot of people I know who are in the industry when it's illegal, now they're kind of ruining the day because they're not making nearly as much money. So that's, I guess, I wish they didn't have to bear the brunt of it. But for me personally, it's not having to worry about getting hung up on and thank God I never really did. But yeah, you hear stories about people, and I get a lot of musicians up until a couple of years ago every year, a couple of musicians would call me. I got popped out on, coming back.
Busted down on Bourbon Street.
And I used to play all these little rinky-dink festivals. I got a lot. Yeah, and I feel like great stories with Vince too, about getting shaken down like cops with the pot. And I don't know if you're Scott Guberman. Scott is. He's a keyboard player, but some very funny stories about getting. It wasn't funny for him because he ended up getting that thing arrested. But the cops would just stay outside these festivals and just.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think back to my time on tour, and I think about all the people these days that discuss the cannabis industry and how it's evolved, and I think back to on tour for years, you used to see those checkpoints that would say drug checkpoint ahead. And then the cops would just sit on the exit ramp, and anyone that pulled off on that exit, they just pop right there. And, anyone that wasn't smart enough to realize that was just a setup and just don't pull over on the next exit ramp, you're probably going to get through fine. But I remember it was basically any major highway between venues, you knew that it was zebras crossing the African River waiting for the crocodiles to get you. That you had 600 miles between cities of going, I hope I don't get popped between here and there, depending on what you're riding dirty with. Well, so it's
and I'll tell you, Rob, you're absolutely right. And for us, I think one of the scariest places to ever have to drive from post-show was out of Alpine Valley. The Wisconsin cops, I mean, they were notorious, on the way in. But funny, too, they'd always have a guy in a van right at when you got off the highway where you had to go and then pull up on a little country road and make a left turn at a stop sign. And they had a guy sitting there in a VW bus wearing a tie-dye shirt and a headband. And he'd be looking into cars to radio ahead. But you could always figure out who he was because he had on black socks and wingtips.
Yeah, exactly.
Even they didn't even know how to look cool when they tried. But they would just, and then after the show, you had to drive, 45 minutes in Wisconsin before you got to the Illinois border. And that was always, not anywhere you wanted to be after a show.
Well, we don't have time today, but sometime I'll tell you the story of Saratoga Springs for a Phish concert. When the New York State Police had a DUI checkpoint going into the show at 2 p.m. Yeah, my son and I called that the Father's Day Massacre because it was Father's Day.
Oh, God. That's no fun. When you got quotas to fill, you're going to have people at those gatherings that'll help you fill quotas. So, but that's, that's why we're pushing this other stuff. And that's why it's good that New Jersey's taking the lead for the East Coast and, helping them push it through.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good news we were talking about before the show, too, Larry, is we also saw some movement this week out of North Dakota and out of South Carolina. And those are two of the more conservative states in the Union. South Carolina just did a poll of all its people, and there's a 5-1 in favor of medicinal cannabis in South Carolina. So at this point, the state legislature has to know it's a foregone conclusion that even in very conservative South Carolina, it's going to pass overwhelmingly. So, does that state legislature try to get ahead of the question and put something, through the House rather than waiting for a ballot initiative?
Hey, I'd like to think that on marijuana, even Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley could get along with people, right? I mean, it's such a
that's
it's
a stretch, man.
Well, but it's such a common thing because look what you just said. Come on, let's take North Dakota. What liberal Democrat ever has a chance of going in there and even getting a measurable percentage of votes? And yet on something like marijuana, these guys are voting for it, not close, overwhelmingly. Yeah. It's just got unquestioned support everywhere, which means that everybody on both sides of the aisle like it and use it. And I think that's great. We talk all the time. It's a great common denominator for people. And, I'm happy to see that North Dakota is doing that. And I'm happy to see that South Carolina is doing that. I had a good buddy who got busted down in South Carolina a number of years ago. Some guy came up to him and said, "You want to buy some marijuana?" and opened up a bag. And while my buddy was standing there looking at it, the cops came up from behind and busted him and the other guy. And all of a sudden I get a call from my buddy, "Hey, can you send me down some bail money?" It was the stupidest thing in the world. Now you can walk into a dispensary and look all you want. You don't have to worry about it.
Yep. So I see we're coming to the end of our time slot. Rob, you want to talk to us about Clubhouse and what we have going there?
Sure. So as I announced in the beginning of the show, I think what we're going to try to do, and again, this is fully experimental, so whether or not it works as well as we thought would like, so far so good. We have an audience right now in Clubhouse, not too many people, but we got a handful of people that are listening in. What we're going to try to do is open this up, and I'm going to switch off my microphone on the computer and move over to Clubhouse, and hopefully it gets piped in through our producer, Dan Humiston's home studio, and we'll be able to take some questions from the audience. So you guys will be hearing this through Dan's studio, and I'll be sitting on a different feed. Before I do, I definitely want to say thank you to Greg for telling us some great stories about the Dead, and also for the Dead-related acts he's been a part of in all of his own work as a musician. I'd also like to say that next week I think we've got some cool stuff that we're doing. I think Mardi Gras is going to be a theme that we're going to be looking into, and sort of the Chinese New Year Mardi Gras years that the Grateful Dead have done, and some of the really fun stuff we've seen there. So we've got another great guest coming to join us for next week. So please, we're going to try this Clubhouse thing again, see if we can't keep doing live simulcasts, if we can make this work. So we are not going to say goodbye right now. We are going to transition over and see if we can't take some questions. And please stick around and join us. If anyone has any questions for Greg Koerner or for Larry Mishkin and Jim Marty, please let us know. So I'm going to bring Raymond. Why don't you come up on stage and let us know if you have a question for any of the panelists discussing Grateful Dead and cannabis right now. How you doing, Raymond? What's going on, man?
Oh, I was just, like I said, man, I had actually meant to take my hand down. I didn't really have a question. I just really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for doing the simulcast. And when I forgot it was a simulcast of a podcast and I raised my hand initially was because he talked about Unlimited Devotion. And I used to live in Florida. It was before Unlimited Devotion came on the scene when Crazy Fingers and Uncle John's Band were the two big games in town. But I was curious if, Greg, if you ever play with Jim Weiss, man, that is one of my good homies. That's family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know Jim, yeah. I just played a game with him a couple of weeks ago. He's amazing, yeah, great keyboard player.
Yeah, I mean, I know he plays with them on and off. He's a good buddy of mine. He's come out to Cali and hung out a couple times.
Oh, cool, yeah, he's awesome. He's great. And he's got his band, he plays in the Heavy Pets.
Oh, yeah, dude, big fan. They got a rhythm section. They got a Heavy Pets rhythm section. So him, Tony, and Jamie, it's just called Lather Up, no vocals, all very psychedelic. Jazz, amazing.
Yeah, but I don't think the Heavy Pets. That's the thing. Like the Grateful Dead cover band thing. Like the Heavy Pets were probably one of the biggest original bands in Florida, with Jim's band.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they're playing now because of COVID and whatnot. But the Grateful Dead cover band still happening all over the place.
Oh yeah, they used to play with Crazy Fingers in South Florida quite frequently, and I used to work at Spirit of Swanee Music Park, so I know a lot of these Florida cats quite well.
Well, with that, I think that's all we probably have today for the Deadhead Cannabis Show. So I'll sign off and say again, thank you to our guest, Greg Koerner. And as always, Larry and Jim, it's a pleasure. And we'll see you guys next week to talk more weed and more Grateful Dead.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. It's always a pleasure, Greg. Thank you very much.
Great to meet you guys.
For sure. And all of our listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. We'll look forward to listening to you again next week. Stay safe, be careful, and enjoy your cannabis responsibly. Thank you.